Yeah, there we go. Hi everyone, it's Artie from the Human Chapters. I'll tell you a little bit about the human chapters. Humans are living narratives with a past, present, and future. These narratives constitute of a number of chapters across the lifespan. The aim of these conversations is to highlight a chapter of the narrative and unpack its connections to other chapters. I don't care whether people are natural storytellers, but I truly do believe that each person has a worthy story to tell. In acknowledgement to country, we acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are. We pay respect to their tribal elders, past and present and emerging. We celebrate their continuing culture and we acknowledge the memory of their ancestors. So today we are going to be talking to Hesham, and his chapter is the model man. Um, yeah, Hesham, introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is Heshan, and firstly, Artie, thank you for having me on. I really do value the time and the space that's created for us to be able to have a conversation like this. So appreciate your time. And yeah, a little bit about me. I run an organization called the Model Man at the moment. That's working with men to help them become role models and access their full potential, and kind of be the best version of themselves every single day. I've had a vast amount of experience in mental health and emotional intelligence facilitation, especially with young men in schools across Melbourne. I've started a few startups as well before this as well when I was younger, which I can go into as we talk about the chapters of my life. And yeah, other than that, I love basketball. I love keeping healthy and fit, always making sure that I'm in an optimal state and making sure that my mindset is always at a high state to peak perform as well. So I'm very much about performance and doing the very best that I can each day to get the most out of life.
Yeah, beautiful. So Hesham, take us back to when your journey began, and that might be childhood.
Yeah, well, my journey began. So, I mean, we'll talk about childhood. So, I was a happy child growing up. I don't remember having too much trouble when I was a child. My parents took good care of me. I was raised in a really like loving family, and I loved playing basketball at the time, as I mentioned. So, I always enjoyed the sports that I was playing. And I was just like a young man just trying to make his way through the world. But I was also very, I guess, naive and innocent when I was a child, and maybe didn't grow as quickly in both maturity and physical stature as maybe the other kids around me. But I learned early to form this identity of being the funny person. I found that's what got me social respect. And being little, I didn't have the physical stature to be the strong guy or the tough guy or the alpha male or anything like that amongst my peers. So I ended up being like the funny one or the one to be having fun around. And I pretty much live that identity still today. I love having a good time. I love joking around with my mates. If any of them watch this, they know I'm a bit of a joker. But I also have this serious side to me. And that's a side that I'm starting to step into more and more as time goes on. But back then, I very much was just a little boy growing up in the world, trying to just make my way through.
Beautiful. And
Yeah.
you talked about peak, I've written peak performance, but talked about
Yeah.
performance, talked about mindset and the best version of yourself.
Mm.
Where did that journey start?
Yeah. So that journey started probably in my earlier adult years. And it was a kind of like a family and a relationship challenges that I was facing when I was growing up. I mentioned that I was came from a family that was very loving, but I also came from a family that faced a lot of challenges, like a lot of families do. And especially during my teenage years, I found that my mum and dad faced a lot of challenges in their relationship. And I ended up being the one that was in between their challenges. I ended up being there trying to resolve their problems, trying to talk both of them through it, trying to make sure that the peace was kept and that their relationship stayed intact. And as a young child, I took on that responsibility. Um, which is a responsibility I don't think too many young kids at the age of 10 to 12 usually take on with such a heavy burden.
Mm,
But I really did take it on, and I became a problem solver out of that, out of those challenges. I became somebody who really wanted to solve problems.
mm,
Yeah, so that was me at that age. And then that turned into, um, as the relationship challenges continued to happen between my parents, I went on this journey where I wanted to figure out how to make sure that relationships stayed together, that people stayed connected, and that also I didn't end up like my dad at the time, who I felt I judged and had perceptions of as being a man that I didn't want to be like. So that's where the passion and the urge to start performing at my best and being the best version of myself came from. It came from not wanting to be like my father at the time.
mm. Wow.
Mm.
And what was, when you say you were judging your dad and you say, what was he doing that you really didn't like or didn't, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he would come home from work. So he was a corporate man. He still is, and he worked in the corporate sector his whole life. Was very successful at what he did, but that came at a cost because the environments he found himself in, he faced a lot of stress and pressure, and just the general, I guess, toxic traits of some corporate environments that you may find even still today exist.
Mm,
And the result of that was that pressure that he wouldn't know how to release would get kind of taken out on the family, where he would come home and release that stress, release that pressure into like our family home,
mm,
with my mother, with me, with my younger brother. And the impacts of that was it broke our family apart at the time. Like our family wasn't stable, and I ended up being the one trying to hold it together. So that's kind of where that came from.
mm. And what are some of those toxic traits within
Yeah.
an
Yeah,
organization?
so I think this is something that a lot of men can relate to, is just like anger, like the not being able to express anger and frustration and ultimately sadness in a healthy way. So at that time, I think my father didn't know how to express those things when he was going through all that stress and pressure. He didn't have a healthy outlet for it. He
Mm,
maybe didn't feel like he had anyone to talk to that he could really vent it healthily. So it just came out in short outbursts
yeah.
or in ways that were destructive at the time. And that's the way I perceived it at the time. And we've since spoken about all of that, obviously, and we're on very good terms now,
Mm,
even working together in my organization to build this. So he was a man who did struggle with anger, I think, and stress,
yeah.
and how to actually cope with those emotions and that pressure. And since then, he's become a man who's actually faced into all of that and worked through his challenges and taken himself on and actually stepped into being a role model and a model man that I am proud of to say is my dad.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the full circle journey. I mean, there's a lot in between that. But yeah, that was the crux of what emotions he kind of dealt with.
Wow. And when you stepped into whether it was the problem solver role or the peacekeeper role at the age of 10, what was that like for you in terms of emotions, mental health? Yeah, just you finding
Mm.
yourself as a child.
It was honestly, I don't think I've answered that question before. That's a very good question. It was scary for me.
Yeah.
And there was also a lot of pressure to be responsible for others.
Mm,
And it's still something today that I'm learning to deal with, because I trained myself at an early age to be responsible for everyone around me and to be that savior and to be that person who fixes things when I see something's broken.
yeah.
So I think at that young age, I was scared. I was always on the defense, and I always felt like I was ready for the fight. And that had positive connotations and negative. But the positive connotations it had was it made me somebody who was very resilient. So I feel like I'm an incredibly resilient person. And I'm a person who, no matter how many times I get knocked down, I come back and I come back stronger. And that seed was planted in those times when I was dealing with those relationship challenges my parents had. But I I kept being resilient. I kept standing up, and because I had to.
Yeah.
And there was this real feeling of I have to do this. There is no other way. It's either I step in or this all falls apart. And when a young man is left or a young child is left with that kind of responsibility, that kind of thought process at a young age, it shapes them. It shapes them very deeply. And I have taken on the strengths of that shaping to run the model man now and do the work that I'm doing with men, and even the work that I've done with young boys previously as well, and just mentoring in general. But I also have to now undo the limiting behaviors that I developed out of that period. So yeah, I really do feel like that young man, that young me went through a lot,
Mm.
but I've since become a really good person out of it, and am creating a lot of change out of what was a very challenging situation.
Absolutely. And it was, I can only imagine how challenging it would have been at home. But then, with in terms of school life, what was that like for you? Having such.
School life, I used to put on a mask. So I mentioned that I was the funny guy. Like I realized at some point, I think it was in year 8, year 7, that being funny and joking around and mucking around um, did two things for me. It got me attention, like it got me some sort of popularity amongst my friends. It got me some accolades amongst just my classmates if I'm making a joke or getting kicked out of class for being silly. But it also masked the anger that I carried and the hurt and the pain that I was carrying from my home space. So I was angry at home. I was sad at home. I was always on edge. But when I came to school, I would put on this mask of just being okay and being the funny kid, and that there was nothing really going on that was wrong.
And no one found out about. And
No, no one found out. But what I find with these things is when young kids suppress things that are going on in their home lives and then bring it to school or bring it to outside environments, um, as much as it's hidden, it's not really hidden
yeah.
because these the home environments that these kids grow up in and I grew up in can lead to things such as bullying, because kids people underestimate kids' ability to read other kids' energies. Now, it's not a conscious thing, but at those ages, I think kids can pick up who's the kid with that insecurity, who's the kid who's hiding something, who's the kid who actually feels okay with who they are. I think those dynamics really do play out in the schoolyard, and definitely played out for me, because I had my experience of bullying growing up, like emotional bullying and things like that, or just being picked on or made fun of. Um, and I don't think anyone who did those things at the time knew that I was going through anything, but they could pick up that I was insecure. And that when you suppress emotion, insecurity is the result. And that insecurity is seen by all people, whether you think you're hiding it or not. So that's something I realized along the way, and something that I now help a lot of people overcome is the limiting beliefs that they've created going through the different chapters of their life, and helping them unravel that so they can be more of themselves. Because otherwise they're living with these insecurities, and those insecurities are running who they are, for one. And also they're projecting out into the world the identity that other people will identify you with.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really interesting. And with that, so I do have one more question in regards to bullying.
Sure.
See, at home you were the peacekeeper and you needed to solve a problem. Coming to the schoolyard, you experienced bullying. Did your problem solving and peacekeeper, yeah, transfer to the schoolyard?
Um, it's different because the problems I was trying to solve at home were for other people.
Yeah.
So I think I also learned in what was going on at home is to lose my self-worth. So solving my own problems, but I didn't know how to do that.
Wow.
So when I came to school, and I think this is something that a lot of kids who go through bullying go through, is they become these very empathetic, very understanding people for other people, but they have no idea how to stand up for themselves and to find their own self-worth because they've given so much of themselves to fixing a problem that's happening elsewhere or to dealing with some challenge that's going on at home.
Yeah.
Uh, I think, well, yeah, actually, I think that's it. Like, I think, yeah, what I just said.
Okay. And you mentioned the limiting beliefs.
Yeah.
Have been penny moments during or before the model man started that you started identifying these limiting beliefs? And yeah, I'm sure
Yeah.
heaps of them.
Well, there was a pivotal moment when I was 22. I actually got bottled in a club. I got hit with a glass bottle across the face, trying to save somebody else, some of my mates,
Mm.
right? And they were in a fight that was breaking out in the club, and I just happened to walk into the room at the wrong time. And being that savior archetype and having that in me, I just jumped in to help, and I got hit. But in that moment, I realized something when I was like lying on the floor. I realized my my entire reality that I created, all the things that were happening to me, the way my life was falling apart with my relationships with my friends, my family, my partner, like all the things that were happening in my life at the time were because I had this inner condition that was manifesting this outer reality that I hadn't dealt with. I realized everything in my reality was my fault. And for the first time in my life, I started to flip from being a victim to starting to look at how I can take responsibility and make a change.
Yeah.
And where that comes into play with limiting beliefs is once you start to internalize and look inward, you start to realize that there's these beliefs that you have that you've adopted from the world. Well, this is my experience. I adopted from the world
Mm.
that weren't necessarily my truth or my beliefs, but they're beliefs that I adopted to either protect myself at the time a particular event occurred, or to help me just get through life somehow. Like I just had developed these coping mechanisms through these limiting beliefs that would keep me safe,
Mm.
or at least that my mind would thought would keep me safe, but they actually had detrimental impact to my life, and it started attracting a lot of limiting things in my reality, which eventually led to me getting bottled. I believe we attract what we believe.
Yeah. That's that's a heavy statement.
Mm.
Yeah. And the idea of thoughts and actions and the ripple effect of all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, at 22. That's crazy.
Yeah. Well, it took me after that, I went on a journey that was very spiritual. I went on that journey of self-discovery. So when I was 22, I'm 31 now. But at that time, for the next probably 6 to 8 years, I went on this journey of self-discovery because I had flipped the switch from pointing outward and blaming the world to what can I do to change who I am so that the world doesn't appear to me this way anymore.
Yeah.
And that took me all over the world. It took me to China. It took me to Bhutan, the most spiritual country in the world. I was with the monks at the time. And it took me through a lot of but religious introspection, like, is there a God? What do I believe? Why am I here? And I started to learn more and more about who I am. And along the way, year after year after year, day after day, picking out the beliefs that were no longer serving me and replacing them with beliefs that served my truth and who I am. Because I think we have a choice to pick our beliefs and
Mm.
choose them, but we first need to be aware of what beliefs are running us and whether they're limiting or they're actually positive and perpetuating us forward into the reality we want.
Mm.
And so that was a journey of 6 to 8 years, and is probably going to be an ever evolving process for me from now on.
Could you give me a few specific examples of how did you identify it, uh, a limiting belief, and then how did you work on it, or yeah, or work through it?
Yeah. So I have realized that when a situation comes up, I look at everything like a mirror. I
Mm.
look at everything in my life like a mirror that's happening outside of me.
Yeah.
And this is actually a technique I use in coaching now. It's like everything's a mirror. and everything's a reflection of me, and I look at what's this situation trying to show me right now.
Yeah.
Like, I believe nothing happens by coincidence. And so if everything around me is happening for a reason,
Mm.
it's either happening for me or it's happening against what I want in my life. If it's happening against, what is this situation trying to teach me about what I believe about myself?
Yeah.
That's a question I ask myself. So, for example, if I don't know, like the bottling example, if I got hit with the bottle,
Yeah.
what is it about me that led to this situation happening in the first place? Was there something about my lack of self-worth? Did I believe I was worthless? Did I believe I deserve this? Do I believe I'm the savior? Is that why I do these things? Like, I start to introspect and look at asking a lot of why questions. So wait, why did this happen? Then I'll get an answer for that because I'll answer it myself. And then I'll be like, okay, then why did that happen? And I'll keep answering until I get back to, hey, I believe something about myself here that's actually attracted this entire thing. It might be like, I don't believe I was worthy of love because I learned that when I was 10 years old that I wasn't worthy of it from my parents. So now I'm living that out in my life wherever I go. And I start to attract situations that would give evidence to the fact that I don't love myself or that I believe I don't love myself. That's kind of the process I take myself through, and I'm doing that every day. I did that today even.
Okay.
Um, Even like just I had this thing where I make myself really wrong, and I feel like I'm a bad person
Mm.
because of things in the past and things that people have told me, and I really believe somewhere inside myself that I'm this bad guy. So I've spent my whole life trying to be this good guy, right? So when a situation triggers me to feel like, oh, like you're doing the wrong thing, or that person's going to feel bad now, you were inconsiderate, I start to look at those thoughts that I'm having about myself, and it's like, wait, those are my beliefs. Where are those coming from?
Yeah.
And that's causing me pain right now. I need to look into this a little bit deeper, so
Mm.
then I can look at, is this actually true?
Yeah.
And if it's not true, what can I believe instead that will serve me going forward? And so I've learned to sit with and process the pain that comes up when a
Mm.
limiting belief is running my life. And then when I process that pain, actually sit in it,
Yeah.
that's when it opens up the space for me to be with, okay, there's something that's happening here and I'm processing this emotion. There's a belief attached to this emotion that's causing that. What is it? And when I identify it, that's when I can like set myself free from it, because I'm like, I can start to talk to myself saying, hey, that's not actually true. Here's all the evidence otherwise in your life. Or because there will always be evidence for the opposite of something that's not true for ourselves.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I was going to ask you, based or building on that evidence, do you go through a process with positive situations or positive experiences in your life to go, well, why did that go so well? Similar process as you're doing with the negatives. Is that a
Yeah.
or
Yeah, so I do have processes in place to make sure that I take account for how my life is going each month.
yeah,
And I've just created that process. It's called like my end of month annual life report, where I check in and see what are all the goals that I have, what have I done really well, what can I improve on. And I think this is a real core piece to having a success mindset, a mindset that keeps you in a state of success and feeling successful every single day,
yeah,
because life is right now. It's not in the future. It's not in the past. So it's important for us to feel successful in our life right now, so we don't regret anything later on, just in case we don't achieve those goals that we set out to achieve.
yeah,
So I do that end of month kind of reporting to myself, and that's only for me to kind of go over, what am I grateful for? What worked out this month? How much have I done? How much have I actually achieved?
yeah.
What can I do to improve on, and just do a little bit more than I did last month? Play
Mm,
the long game. Those are the kind of things that I do to keep myself accountable to identifying both positive and negative, or like destructive beliefs that are running my life.
yeah. And out of sheer curiosity, what was your experience like with the monk?
Oh, that's an interesting one. No one's ever asked me that. That monk kind of actually read my palm at the time. And he was our spiritual leader while we were in Bhutan. And he read my palm and he said that I had the lines of somebody who was chosen. like a chosen person to go out in the world and do good things and make a difference to the world. And he really believed that. So he would introduce me to all these monks that would be going to the different temples saying, this man is chosen. He has like a line of, I guess, like success in his future that he's going to be giving to a lot of people, like helping a lot of people. And so I would be getting blessings from all these monks.
Oh wow.
Um, yeah. So that was a pretty cool experience. But can you actually reframe your question again so I can answer it specifically?
Yeah. So what was your experience like with the monks being,
Yeah.
how long you were there for? Like you're learning from them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the experience was actually that I was being believed in by people who didn't even know who I was. Like that's where things really started to shift for me, because as I went on the spiritual journey and I started to come across people who replicated me starting to believe in myself. Like there were people coming and saying, "Hey, we believe in you. Like we can see that you're destined for something. We can see," like having them put those words into me. Like I honestly, I never got that from my family. Like I never got those words of affirmation. I never got that from people in my surroundings growing up. Nobody ever told me they believed in me. In fact, the first person who ever told me they believed in me was my boss in China. After university, I lived in China for a while, and I had a boss there, and who I was working for a 3D printing company because I'm an engineer,
Yeah.
and he actually on the last day told me that he believes that I could do great things and I should go start my own businesses, and that's where the whole business journey started. And I had a few startups before this one that I was working on, and funnily enough, I started those startups to prove my dad wrong because I was angry at him. And those startups didn't work out the way I wanted to because they came from that place of anger and pushing and drive to prove to my dad that I was this man that was better than him. And because I was coming from that place, it didn't work out.
Mm.
Little did I know that my destiny was in working with him all along, probably 5-10 years in the future, and that all of that was going to teach me the business acumen I needed to know, have the worldly experience to be doing trade between here and China and working with different countries, so that I could then bring that to this organization, work together with him, and then create something that I was destined to create. Because I truly believe there's an element of destiny in what I'm creating right now. And it's nothing to do with me. I'm just being used to create it. That's how I look at it.
Wow. That's incredible to, yeah, hear you say that nobody had words of affirmation for you until your first boss. And how many, to me, I'm thinking, how many other kids go through that? Or not even kids, like people in general.
Yeah.
Yeah, go through it. My
Mm.
next question might seem very weird, but your, so this is about your breakup with with dad and makeup with dad. What were
Yeah.
those experiences like? And
The
yeah,
breakup with that, yeah, the
yeah,
breakup with dad, when I was 18, I made a decision to never be like him. And I made that decision in two beliefs that I drilled into myself. One was, what were they? So I will never be like him, and I will do anything I can to not be like him.
yeah,
Those are the two things that I told myself. Like I will never be like him, and also I will never rely on him. That was another thing so I was like, I'm gonna do whatever it takes to make sure that I'm not relying on him and that he can't have this hold on me that I perceive that he had.
yeah,
Right. Um, and out of that was a lot of hate, a lot of anger, a lot of spite towards him. But now moving to 10 years or so later, the in-between journey was, after I came back from that spiritual journey, I came to this point where I realized a whole bunch of things about my dad and about my family and about people in the past that I had previously judged unfairly.
yeah,
And that, even to admit that I had judged them unfairly, that was a big part of my growth, because everything inside me wanted to say, hey, no, like he did this, she did this, that person treated you like this. Like all those voices were screaming in me. So it was a process to get to the point where I'm like, actually, have I ever asked him? Have I ever really talked to him? No. Why? Because I'm afraid that I'm going to get angry, that all the pain is going to come up again. eventually I came to this point in my development after doing a lot of personal development on my own in like personal development courses and then also the spiritual journey, was to go talk to him and be like, Dad, this is how I felt.
Mm.
And this is, and so much of what I went through and the way that I thought, he had no idea. And then on top of that, I had no idea about his journey and what he was going through. So the in between journey to that was starting to understand one another again. And
Yeah.
I opened the doors to that by being like, hey, Dad, like, this is how I used to feel when you used to speak to mom like this or talk to mom like that. When these things were going on at home and you would come home at night stressed, like, this is how I felt.
Yeah.
And this was how it shaped me. Him hearing all of this, like, he would sit there and listen, and then he would share his perspective. And then that's when things started to change, because as we started to talk about what really happened, it started to remove all the assumptions from the piece. Because they also started to understand why I started to isolate myself, why I stopped talking to them, why I stopped trusting people, why I became the way I came. And in that, that's where the journey continued. As we started to tell more and more story, I started to understand more and more of his lineage. He
Mm.
started to understand more and more of my upbringing and the journey I went through as his son, and then also independently on my own spiritual journey. Once we both started to understand that bigger picture more, and the picture became clearer and clearer, we became closer and closer.
Mm.
And at some point, I realized there was just this inkling in me that me and him needed to work together, which brought up a whole lot more stuff because I didn't want to go to him for help,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
Like, I told myself when I was 18, I will never ever rely on this man. Now the universe, and to me it was God. Like, God was telling me, go and talk to this man, work with him, and go and create this massive change out in the world that I want you to. And that that took a long time. It took about 6 months for me to actually go and talk to him, from the moment I realized I should to actually going and speaking to him about doing this. Then it took me another 6 months to actually start booking weekly meetings with him to work with him, because the amount of pain that was coming up in every meeting,
Yeah.
talking to him, dealing with him, just like being in his presence, working together, was so much. And it's still a process, but we've come to this point now where we are working together very strongly. He's a completely changed man from who he was when we were younger.
Yeah.
He took complete responsibility and ownership for who he was as a man back then. And that's all he needed to do. Once he did that, he became a better person from it. He started to think more about the people around him. He started to stress less. And he's gotten to this place where now he's so peaceful, he's so loving to people. And people are like almost kind of shocked at the man that he's become from where he was. Now,
Wow.
that, yeah, that kind of change comes from that level of vulnerability between two people, and the courage to address what's really there between the two people that hasn't been spoken of, and to give up your right to assume and to judge without actually speaking to the person about what really happened in that situation.
Absolutely. Wow. I could. So when you said that other people were quite surprised at the man that he's become now, was his relationships with others sort of similar to what it was like at home, or were they?
When we were younger.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think with everyone else, he was a lighter version of himself and also put on his own mask. So
Yeah.
I think I got my funny side, my fun side from him. I think people say I'm my father's son, right?
Yeah.
We look the same, we talk the same, we have the same demeanor, we almost have the same capacity to lead. There's a lot of my genetic makeup that's very similar to him. So we were very powerful mirrors for each other, but both of us then took on putting on masks to mask our pain, because that's what society gets you to do. Like, society doesn't promote talking about your emotions, talking about your feelings. I think it does more today, but definitely back then it didn't. And he walked around as this man who was confident, he was joking, he was laughing, he knew how to build rapport with people. But underneath it, he was really hurting. And so was I, and so was my mother, and so was my brother. And we all put on our masks in different ways to deal with what would happen inside those four walls of our home.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, right? No one knows what goes on behind closed doors.
No,
And
and that's why you got to ask. That's why you got to find out. And I think part of having a success mindset is really being able to put yourself out there, have discussions with others, find out what other people think.
yeah,
And the whole crux of the model man is it's not what you think about yourself that matters. It's what others think about you that's going to make the difference to your success. So you need to get to understand what other people think.
yeah,
Because if you don't understand what other people think,
mm,
then success is going to be very difficult and hard to come by because you're going to be trying to do everything alone and you're going to be doing everything that you do based on assumptions of others. And success is a community and a collective project. It's not something you do alone. Human beings weren't designed to succeed alone.
mm,
In fact, primitively, like if a caveman or a cave woman were alone in the wild, they would get eaten. But if they were protected by their tribe, they would have more higher chance to succeed. So human beings from the very beginning were designed to work in group and community.
yeah,
And that's why this work is so important and why a big part of success mindset is making sure that you understand what others think.
absolutely. And we'll delve into the success mindset in just a moment. But before we go to that, the end of your spiritual journey, did you find what you were looking for? Did you, yeah, was obviously it was a discovery journey, but what was the end outcome
Mm.
result? Yeah,
I found God. If I had to put it in one word,
yeah,
I found God, and I found and what that means to me, because I understand people have all sorts of variations as to what God means to them. And I'm not talking about in a religious perspective, but I'm talking about in a something to believe in. I found something that I could have faith in, something that I could find love in. When the world couldn't give that to me, there's always this one steady source that could. And I only found God maybe now 2 years ago. I didn't believe in God before that, but I had some very spiritual experiences in Bhutan and like ever since that kind of led to me just going down this path. It wasn't something that was forced, but I'm now a firm believer that there is something greater than I and greater than all of us that put us here. And just having that, whether it's true or not, having that kind of mindset can bring a lot of peace. Because if you're trying to rely on doing everything alone and on the earth and on just other people, and there's not something greater that's there to take care of you or for you to play the long game into, then there can be a lot of like hopelessness.
mm,
I believe like I found a lot of hopelessness in life when there wasn't something to have hope in. And if you're just relying on the human condition and other human beings to get ahead in life,
yeah,
then the problem with that is we're all the same and we all don't know why we're here. We don't know how we got here, and all we can do is assume how, right? And
correct.
that and the hard part about that is we can't get into the mind of whoever or whatever put us here and ask questions because that we're going into something that's intangible here. Like God's not this person right now that is on like a man on the earth that we're speaking to. In my idea, that man's name is Jesus, but he's not existing right now as a human being,
Mm,
right?
mm,
And what I'm trying to get at there is if you don't have something greater to believe in, whatever it is, then it's going to be very difficult for you to have hope and
mm,
to then have the resilience to continue on in a way that you actually have peace and are able to maintain peace while pursuing performance, while pursuing success. So, I mean, it comes back to success mindset for me. I think there needs to be an element of rest in your journey to finding who you are as a person and actually succeeding in life as well. And I think it's a thing that a lot of people struggle to do is to actually find peace day to day. And I think a big part of that is because people don't have a spiritual connection in whatever capacity they have to something that will give them that peace, or they haven't found that way yet. And I've found mine.
absolutely. And could you tell us about one of your deeply moving spiritual experiences, if any one of them comes to mind straight away?
I can. If anybody asks, I tell them. It's not something that I usually talk about, but I had an experience in my mum's kitchen when about 2 years ago, where this man, Jesus, appeared in my kitchen. And he appeared through me to my mother. Now, I didn't believe in God. I didn't believe there was a man named Jesus. I didn't believe in any of that, right? I was a very scientific person. I was a very universal person. I was very much into the spiritual gurus of the world, Sadhguru. I was into
Okay.
just all the mentors that are out there in the world that are either spiritual leaders or people who are just in leadership positions in the world, like Simon Sinek. So I was very much like a YouTube guy. And then suddenly this experience happened, this spirit or being appeared through me. And there was just this knowing that there was someone there and something greater. And this happened between me and my mum saw who appeared through me. My mum didn't believe in all of that either. And then that day changed our lives forever. After that, I couldn't really deny there was something greater because it happened, and I experienced it, and there was a knowing in my spirit as a human spirit that something had happened that was in alignment with where I needed to go in life, and that being appeared for that reason, to come and tell me that, and to make sure that I knew that no matter what happens from here going forward, because my journey has been difficult going forward from that point,
Yeah.
things actually got more difficult because then I had to really face myself and
Mm.
deal with all parts of me to become the purest being that I could become. And I'm still on that journey today. And then for mum, it became also a calling to feel like that she's safe and that she's being watched over, and she went on her own journey around that. So that was the experience that changed it all. And then in Bhutan, I also had an experience where my body kind of disappeared and I became one with everything, and I experienced all the suffering, all the happiness, all the joy, all the pain on the earth at once. And this is on the top of a mountain there.
Yeah.
And I experienced this, as whether it was real or not is up to people's interpretation. But for me, that was my experience. And in that experience, there was a knowing that I was connected to everything and everyone. Those were the two pivotal spiritual experiences I had that shaped my spiritual identity in a sense, and have given me a very rock solid foundation to go and launch the Model Man,
Yeah.
and to stand in what I'm doing right now as my calling and my purpose and my destiny.
Yes.
Because without those experiences, I wouldn't have known if these things were destined or it's just something that I'm thinking in my head. But connecting the dots back, and now my ability to connect the dots forward into the future as well, is giving me a very clear picture that there's an element of destiny in what I'm doing here.
Absolutely. Wow. Oh, all of the, I'm just thinking about you on the mountaintop, experiencing all those emotions at once. Holy
It was
moly.
very, it was, I cried for about 2 hours before I finally went and spoke to someone after I came back. Because it was kind of this, I went out into everything and then I came back in. And
Yeah.
it was all this, like I experienced, it was like I carried the whole weight of the world on me in that moment. For however long I was in that space, that's what happened. But since that day, I feel like I can tune into people a lot easier. I can feel into what people are feeling. I can experience and be more empathetic to what's happening around me a lot more than I used to before that moment. That was how that shaped me.
That's incredible and extraordinary, and just how, yeah, you've articulated those two pivotal spiritual moments. Yeah.
Well, nobody asks me. So this is the kind of thing that I don't go speaking about. But if somebody asks me, I believe that it's being asked because it's meant to be spoken about. And so, yeah, thank you for asking.
No, not at all. Yeah, I'm always curious about spiritual beings and what's someone's experience of spirituality and what, yeah, what their journey's
Mm.
been. My next, and perhaps this will be the tie-up question: what is your calling, purpose, and destiny?
My calling, purpose, and destiny is to make sure that people are as completely self-aligned to themselves as possible, meaning they're left in a place where they're embodying love. Because I think if people get to that place where people are embodying love, then life starts to completely open up for you. And the more you're able to do that within yourself, the less worries you have, the more free you are to experience life. and like you're living out what you were designed to do as a human being, which was just to experience life to its fullest and create.
Yeah.
I think all of us have the capacity to create beautiful things in this world, beautiful experiences with one another, and also create beautiful businesses like you and I are doing, conversations like we are. We're creative beings, right? But in order for that expression to happen, we need to be aligned in love as much as possible. So I think it's, if I can embody the ideals of what true love and unconditional love looks like more and more each day, then that's my destiny and my journey. And I don't need to do anything else, because then I become an example for others to be able to do the same, to question me about it, so that we can both start to learn about what love is to us.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think that's what my destiny is just to grow every day and make sure that I'm leaving this positive impact on in the world through embodying love more and more each day.
Absolutely. And now tell us about the model man. What is it? What do you, yeah.
Well, the Model Man is an organization that was born out of all my challenges, all my journey with my dad, my spiritual journey, all of that. It's a company and an organization that's focused on creating male role models and helping men access their full potential and be the best versions of themselves every day.
Yeah.
So in order to do that, we run programs, and we're focused on the working professional sector with our programs, where we work with men to help them develop a success mindset. So a mindset that makes sure ensures that they produce success every day, and like true success, and also work on their personal brand, which is something that my dad teaches. So you can think about a company like a central hub for coaches and mentors that people can access to become a better version of themselves and improve both their professional and their personal life. Right now, we're working with working professionals who are men in industry, but we're tailoring things in such a way that people who come into our success programs can work on both their professional and personal goals at the same time, because I believe they all intertwine. And the root of being able to have a happy work life is the same as having a happy personal life. I think it's one in the same.
Yeah.
So I love to help people work in these two sectors on their mindset, and then developing what their brand is and who they are, because that gets them to work on their identity and make shifts to become a better person.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much what the Model Man's about.
Okay. And what is true success to you? I'm aware it's a very subjective question.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the point. Even being a model man is, what true success is, that's different to every person, and every person is on their own journey. But I believe there's a collective and unifying journey that we can all go on to help each other get to that place within ourselves. So what true success to me is to be happy, healthy, to be free of mind, of heart, and of spirit. Because if you're free in those places and nothing's impacting you, you're able to be yourself at all times. And therefore, you're able to experience life. And what's the point of being alive if we're not experiencing the very thing that we are, which is life itself?
Wow, that was really well put and so concisely.
Thank you.
That's awesome. Have I have or do you have any points, any part of your chapter of the life that I haven't asked you a question about?
Mm, no, I think everything that was spoken about was very much what was meant to be spoken about. I don't think there's any chapters that were skipped or anything like that. I think, in fact, you went into chapters that I really haven't spoken about to too many people at all, because you asked questions so generously and openly. So thank you for doing that. I definitely don't think there was anything skipped.
Oh, there you go. Thank you. And for a wrap up question is actually two questions. What does a utopian world look like for you?
Yeah, well, I think it's a world where everyone is the best versions of themselves, and everyone is feeling free and safe to be who they are. Because if everyone's, I think the crux of all of our problems is people don't feel safe to do that
Mm.
for whatever reason. But if we have that safety, and this world is like a safe space in a sense for people to live in harmony and be themselves, then everything will just unfold from there. So I would love to see a world where there are role models in society that are embodying this more and more, which is why I'm running the Model Man. And then that gives permission for more and more people to then start to step into the true version, a full version of themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you have 3 to 5 key takeaways for anybody listening to this chapter?
Um, Takeaways, let me feel. Make sure that in order for you to be successful, take responsibility. Look to take responsibility for everything that's happening in your life and in your environments, and that's happening to you, because that's actually the key to freedom. The second thing is live a life you love and make sure that you are surrounding yourself with people who allow you to live that way. And maybe thirdly is always look to see what you believe is true or not for yourself.
Yeah,
And I'll sum that up with what you believe you receive, and what you allow yourself to receive, you'll also achieve.
yeah, beautiful. Well, Heshan, thank you so much for taking the time out and, yeah, speaking so openly, honestly, generously about your experiences, your chapters, and the model man. It will be
Thank you so much for having me on. This is actually a really beautiful experience, and I feel more alive from having shared my life like that. And I think what you allow people to do is be more of themselves and actually identify with their story in even deeper. So thank you for what you do.
You're very welcome. And anyone listening to this chapter, please feel free to share it with your friends, family, anyone that may resonate with it. That would be awesome. So thank you so
Yeah.
much.
There's one more thing actually. I'd love for people to follow me on Instagram, the Model Man Official.
Yes,
That's the Model Man Official, because that's where we do a lot of our work, and we actually provide a lot of value around success mindset and helping people. So please get behind the journey and get behind us and join us in any way you can.
great. And I'll put the tag in the introduction as well.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Stop.